Competitor number 1, MedBIKE.
Hi, thanks very much. My name's Peter Wood. I'm a research associate at the, University of Alberta Department of Computing Science. My background's in cardiac physiology, and that's sort of how I ended up heading towards this particular project. MedBIKE is a cardiac rehabilitation system that has been designed to specifically counteract the barriers that have been reported to prevent people from performing their recommended cardiac rehabilitation. Essentially, the issues are that people don't do it. It's really unhealthy not to do it, and there's something that's missing. Essentially, cardiac rehabilitation has been stuck in the Stone Age for a very long time. For the last 50 years, the treatment actually hasn't changed almost at all, regardless of the evidence that's been collecting over the years and the new technologies that are coming out. And I'm really hoping that MedBIKE can change that. So what we've done is we've come up with a fun and interactive exercise experience, which allows remote clinical monitoring, and allows people to communicate, allows the clinician to communicate with the patient and vice versa when they're performing the task. Oops, hang on. There we are. So the novelty involved with this system is that it is home-based, where most clinical rehabilitation is actually performed in the hospital. It's missing the link, missing a very important link, and that is fun. Cardiac rehabilitation, typically people go into the hospital and they're told to do it, and that's it. And so we've built in a virtual reality engine that allows people to perform their rehabilitation. Is it sustainable? Well, the data itself shows that it has to be performed. So all we really have to do is find a way into the market and get someone to pay for it. I was recently actually told today that there's an insurance company in the US that pays for people's gym memberships, and in order to reduce their long-term negative outcomes. And that is exactly what we want to do. We want to convince insurance companies that this system can get people to perform their cardiac rehabilitation and get them to actually start doing it, and then that'll reduce their hospital and their long-term care. I'm running out of time. Expenses. So we're going to perform a clinical trial. This clinical trial, we think, will show that MedBIKE is going to work. And we're going to use this funding in order to sustain a longer-term trial so that we can enter the marketplace. Thank you very much. There's a little cartoon for you. Questions?
We have 3 minutes for questions.
Questions from the audience.
Please raise your hand if you have a question.
In the back.
Is your intention that the bike is something purchased by the patient or rented through the health organization?
So we've explored a few avenues as to how we can actually market it and get it into the healthcare sector. Who could do it? The patient, well, they're probably not, a lot of patients are probably not going to purchase the bike, particularly because the majority of patients who suffer from heart disease are actually from a lower socioeconomic status. So that's probably not the answer. Healthcare providers, well, Ontario healthcare is bankrupt, so they're probably not going to buy it either. But we are going to approach insurance companies, and insurance companies do tend to focus on the long term rather than just the short term. And I think with the data as it is, in that only 5% of people in Canada perform cardiac rehabilitation who should be, and if you perform cardiac rehabilitation, you have of those population, if they perform cardiac rehabilitation, they have a 30% better outcome, and that will definitely translate into reduced costs. So I think the insurance company is probably the way to go on that one.
Rick Hugh, question is that with insurance company, the sales cycle is about 2 years long. That's been our personal experience. And so is that, how do you see your sales cycle going? in terms of providing a service to the insurance company? And what do you have to measure the effectiveness of your particular rehabilitation process compared to other rehabilitation processes?
Well, I'll answer your second question first, and because we're stemming from an educational institution, a research institution, we can actually perform ongoing studies like the ones we already have planned. We have a clinical trial that's going to start in January, and that's going to prove the feasibility of introducing such a system into the healthcare sector. When we can perform longer-term studies after that to determine the long-term outcomes. As far as measuring how long it's going to take to actually enter the market, we haven't performed those sorts of market analysis at the moment. But I presume it'll probably take take longer than you expect it to be, and probably from what I expect it to be, even though I know what the data is, just because it's very difficult to introduce new strategies and technologies into the healthcare sector. And those people who do, they push for a very long time. But I think in the end, if you can get in, it's definitely worth it.
Quick question from the back here was, have you figured out what your price point's going to be yet?
For the MedBIKE, no, we haven't. The tools involved, because there's so many tools such as remote monitoring, there's an ECG, there's an oxygen, and there's a blood pressure. The ECG already came down in price within the last 12 months. It was a $1,200 unit, came down to $600. So the prices are coming down. Our particular price point we haven't come up with, but we actually have a non-medical version of the VR of the bike virtual reality simulator, and we're releasing that in December.
We're going to cut you off. Sorry, it's 30 seconds post.
I won't tell you.
Thanks for the question. Thanks very much. It's going to be equal opportunity with the judges here. Sounds like there are some questions to be answered afterwards, and we are having an after party where everybody's invited. So if there are more questions for each of the contenders, then we'll do it there.